Prince Józef Antoni Poniatowski was a Polish leader, general, minister of war and army chief, who became a marshal of the French Empire, early Austrian years and war with Turkey. Prince Józef Antoni Poniatowski was born in Vienna, Austria in the Palais Kinsky. He was baptized in Vienna's Schottenkirche. He was the son of Andrzej Poniatowski, the brother of the last king of Poland Stanislaw II Augustus, and a field marshal in the service of Austria. His mother was Countess Maria Theresia Kinsky von Weinitz-und-Tettau, a lady in the court of Maria Theresa belonging to the influential Czech-Austrian aristocratic family. His father died when Joseph was 10. Stanislaw II Augustus then became his guardian, and the two enjoyed a close personal relationship that lasted for the rest of their lives. Maria Theresa was a godmother of Joseph's older sister, who was also named Maria Theresa, after the empress. Joseph was born and raised in Vienna, but was also spent time with his mother in Prague and later with his uncle the king in Warsaw. Brought up in the ancient regime society, he was tutored in French, and spoke to his mother in that language. He also learned Polish and German. As a child, he acquired the nickname Prince Pepe, the Czech diminutive form of Joseph. He was trained for a military career, but also learned how to play keyboard instruments and had a portable one which he carried with him later even during military campaigns. It was because of King Stanislaw II August's influence that Poniatowski chose to consider himself a Polish citizen, and he transferred to the Polish army at the age of 26. In Vienna, he represented the Polish king at the funeral of Maria Theresa. In 1787 he travelled with Stanislaw II Augustus to Kaniov and Kiev to meet with Catherine the Great. Having chosen a military career, Poniatowski joined the Austrian Imperial Army where he was commissioned lieutenant in 1780. In 1786–1788, promoted to colonel, and when Austria declared war against Ottoman Empire in 1788, he became an aide-de-camp to Emperor Joseph II. Poniatowski fought in that war and distinguished himself at the storming of Sabak on 25 April 1788, where he was seriously wounded. At Sabak he also reportedly saved the life of a younger colleague, Prince Karl Philipp Schwarzenberg. Later their military paths crossed repeatedly, as friends and foes. And at the end of Poniatowski's career, Schwarzenberg delivered the crushing blow at the Battle of Leipzig, in which Poniatowski was killed. Polish military service and defense of the 3rd of May Constitution, summoned by his uncle, King Stanislaw II Augustus, and the same when the Polish army was reorganized. Poniatowski returned to Poland. The king had made previous arrangements with the Austrian authorities for this transfer, which in the end depended on his nephew's willingness to make the move. In October 1789, together with Tadeusz Kosciusko and 3 others, Poniatowski received the rank of Major General, and was appointed commander of a division in Ukraine, and devoted himself to rebuilding the small, and long-time neglected, Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth's army. This took place during the period of deliberations by the 4-year Sejm, which ended with the proclamation of the 3rd of May Constitution in 1791. Poniatowski was an enthusiastic supporter of the reforms and a member of the Friends of the Constitution Association. The passage of the document was assured partially by the military forces under the prince's command, which surrounded the royal castle during the final proceedings. He himself stood in the room with a group of soldiers. On 6 May 1792 Poniatowski was appointed lieutenant general and commander of the Polish army in the Ukraine, with the task of defending the country against the imminent Russian attack. There Prince Joseph was aided by Kosciusko and Michał Wielhorski, a friend from the Austrian service. In the fighting, badly outnumbered and outgunned by the enemy, obliged constantly to retreat, but disputing every point of vantage, he turned on the pursuer whenever the Russian pressed too closely, and won several notable victories. The Battle of Zeeland on 18 June was the first major victorious engagement of the Polish forces since Jan III Sobieski. Poniatowski personally got involved in the fighting when one of the Polish columns was faltering. To celebrate the victory and commemorate the occasion, the Polish king established the Virtuti Militari Order, with which he decorated Poniatowski and Kosciusko first. At the Battle of Dubienka fought by Kosciusko and his soldiers on 18 July, the line of the southern Bug River was defended for 5 days against fourfold odds. The Polish armies converged on Warsaw and prepared for a general engagement. A courier from the capital informed the commander-in-chief that King Stanislaw II August had acceded to the pro-Russian Targowica Confederation, and had pledged the adherence of the Polish army to it as well. All hostilities were to be suspended. The army remained loyal to Prince Joseph, and he considered staging a coup d'état option that involved kidnapping the king. But after issuing contradictory orders, he finally decided not to do so. Supposedly distressed by the political situation, at the last skirmish of the war at Marcuszu on 26 July he supposedly sought his own death, but was saved. After an indignant but fruitless protest, Poniatowski and most of the other Polish generals resigned their commissions and left the army. In a farewell gesture, Prince Joseph's soldiers expressed their gratitude by having a memorial medal minted, and wrote to the prince's mother in Prague, thanking her for having such a great son. Poniatowski left Warsaw for Vienna, from where he repeatedly challenged the Targowica leader Szczesny Potocki to a duel. However, the Russian authorities wanted him removed away from Poland even further, and the fearful king pressured him to comply. Poniatowski left Vienna to travel in Western Europe, which at the time was traumatized at that time by the violent events of the French Revolution. In 1792, in a letter to the king, Prince Joseph expressed his opinion that in order to save the country and preserve Poland he should have already at the outset of this campaign, raised the whole country, led the nobility on a horse, armed the towns and given freedom to the peasants. The Polish-Russian War was followed by the Second Partition of Poland. It gave rise to 4 decades of intense warfare aimed at preserving Poland's independence. It included several major wars. It ranged from San Domingo to Moscow, and included Dąbrowski's Polish legions, as well as famous exploits, such as Somosierra, Fuengirola, and Albura. 1794 Kosciusko Insurrection. Stanislaw August Poniatowski wrote to his nephew in the spring of 1794. Poniatowski came with Wielhorski again and reported for duty at Kosciusko's camp near Jedrzejów on 27 May. Kosciusko proposed that Prince Joseph lead the insurrection in Lithuania, where he was demoting the radical and successful leader Jakub Jasinski. However, Poniatowski, not wanting to be so far from his uncle who needed him, declined. He suggested instead Wielhorski, which Kosciusko approved. Poniatowski himself participated in combat in and around Warsaw. As a division commander he fought at Blony between 7 and 10 July, and led cavalry in an anti-Prussian diversion at Marymont on 26-27 July. During the Prussian siege of the city, Mokranowski was sent to Lithuania to replace ailing Wielhorski, and Poniatowski was given his post in Warsaw's defense. Between 5 and 10 August, in a victorious and promising series of confrontations, he took from the Prussians the Góry Swedki region, then lost it after a couple of weeks in a counterattack, for which, despite Kosciusko's warnings, he didn't properly prepare. He was injured while trying to recover the lost ground, when his horse was shot under him. In October he led his outnumbered troops in an attack on Prussian entrenchments at the Bezura River, which at the cost of heavy losses tied up the Prussians and saved Dąbrowski's corps, by allowing it to return to Warsaw. During the course of this war and revolution, the prince felt alienated by the actions and influence of the radical wing led by Hugo Kołłątaj, while the military cooperation between him, Dąbrowski, and Józef Zajacic was not what it should have been, and things got worse after Kosciusko's capture at Maciejowice. Withdrawal into private life. The insurrection having failed, Poniatowski stayed for a while in Warsaw. His estates were confiscated, but having refused a position in the Russian army and unwilling to comply with the loyalty conditions that the Russian authorities wanted to impose on him, was ordered to leave the Polish capital and in April 1795 moved once more to Vienna. The Kosciusko Rising led to the Third Partition of Poland. 1796 saw the death of Catherine II of Russia. Her son, Tsar Paul I, returned Poniatowski's estates and again tried to hire him into the Russian army. To excuse himself, Prince Joseph claimed being in an extremely poor health. In 1798, however, his uncle, the former King Stanislaw August, died in St. Petersburg. Poniatowski left Vienna for his funeral and to arrange for the proper disposition of the late king's finances, inheritance and obligations. He stayed in St. Petersburg for several months, and then, being on good terms with Tsar Paul and his court, returned to Poland, into his estates in Warsaw and in Jablona. Warsaw at that time was under Prussian rule. There until 1806 Poniatowski lived a private life of parties and play, politically not very active, often shocking the public opinion by the conduct of himself and his friends. His household was managed strictly by one Henrietta Vauban, an older woman whom he brought from Vienna and who was apparently able to exert a great deal of influence over the prince. His residences were open to various personalities. The future King Louis XVIII, brother of Louis XVI who was executed by the revolution, who needed a place to stay with his family and court, was Poniatowski's guest at the Laczenki Palace for a few years after 1801. In 1802, beset by legal troubles stemming from Stanislaw August's succession, Poniatowski made a trip to Berlin, where he stayed for months and established cordial personal relations with the Prussian royal family. Prince Joseph never married, had two sons with two of his unmarried partners. The first one, Joseph Szczesny Poniatowski, with the singers Elia Sitanska and Karol Josef Maria Poniatowski, with Zofia Sosnowska from the Potocki family. Duchy of Warsaw and victory in the 1809 Austro-Polish War. Following French Emperor Napoleon I's victory at the Battle of Jena and the ensuing evacuation by Prussia of her Polish provinces. In November 1806 Poniatowski was asked by the Prussian King Frederick William III to assume the governorship of Warsaw, to which he agreed. He also assumed the command of the city's municipal guard and citizen militia forces organized by local residents. All of this turned out to be a short-lived Polish provisional authority, because quick succession of events on the European scene presented the Poles with new opportunities and forced upon them new choices. At the end of that year, Joachim Murat and his forces entered Warsaw, and Poniatowski had to define his role within this new political reality. It took protracted negotiations with Murat and persuasion by Józef Wybicki. But before the year was over, Poniatowski was declared by Murat to be chief of the military force, and was leading the military department on behalf of the French authorities. Dąbrowski, who was the choice of many Polish veterans of the Polish legions and of the insurrection, as well as Zajacic, were bypassed, even though they both had served under Napoleon when Poniatowski was inactive. On 14 January 1807, by the Emperor's decree, the Warsaw Governing Commission was created under Stanislaw Malachowski, and within this structure Poniatowski became officially director of the Department of War and set about organizing the Polish army. In July 1807 the Duchy of Warsaw was created. In its government, Poniatowski on 7 October became Minister of War and head of army of the Duchy of Warsaw, while Napoleon, not yet quite trusting him, left the supreme military command in Davout's hands until summer of 1808. Poniatowski officially became Commander-in-Chief on 21 March 1809. The Minister of War became completely devoted to the creation and development of this new, ostentatiously Polish army. The duchy's army existed and operated under most difficult circumstances, and its success depended largely on the military and political skills of the chief commander. For example, it was severely underfunded and most of the military units were kept by Napoleon outside of the country, to be used in numerous campaigns, which is why Prince Joseph had a rather small force at his disposal during the War of 1809. In spring of 1809, Poniatowski led his army against an Austrian invasion under the Archduke Ferdinand Karl Joseph of Austria-Est. In the war that was regarded by Austrian high command as a crucial element of their struggle with Napoleonic France. At the bloody Battle of Rasin near Warsaw on 19 April, where he personally led his men in an infantry bayonet charge, Polish forces under Poniatowski's command fought to a standstill an Austrian force twice their number. Afterwards, however, decided not to defend Warsaw and withdrew with his units to the east bank of the Vistula River, to the fortified Praga suburb, which the Austrians attacked, but were defeated at Grochowo on 26 April. An Austrian division then crossed the Vistula again trying to pursue the Poles, but was routed on 2 May at Góra Kalwaria in a daring attack led by General Michał Sokolnicki. Ferdinand made a couple of attempts more, trying to establish a bridgehead on the other side of the Vistula, but those were defeated, which left the initiative in Poniatowski's hands. From there he quickly advanced south, staying close to the Vistula to control the situation and taking over large areas of Galicia, that is southern Poland, that was controlled by Austria under the partitioning arrangement. On 14 May Lublin was taken. On the 18th fortified and vigorously defended Sandomierz. On the 20th the Zamość fortress was overpowered, where 2,000 prisoners and 40 cannons were taken, and even further east Lvov was taken on the 27th of May. These military developments compelled the Austrians to withdraw from Warsaw. A counter-offensive by their main force resulted in the retaking of Sandomierz on the 18th of June. But Poniatowski in the meantime moved west of the Vistula, and on 5 July, the day of the Battle of Wagram, began from Radom his new southbound offensive aimed at Krakow. He arrived there on 15 July, and while the demoralized and not capable of effective defense Austrians tried to turn the city over to the Russians, Poniatowski at this point was not to be outmaneuvered or intimidated. Seeing a Russian hussar cavalry unit in attack formation blocking the street leading to the bridge on the Vistula, he rode his raised-up horse into them, so that several flipped as they were falling. Most of the liberated lands, with the exception of the Lvov region, became incorporated into the duchy through the peace treaty of 14 October 1809. Prince Joseph himself, celebrated by the residents of the old royal capital of Poland, remained in Krakow until the end of December, supervising the provisional Galician government in existence from 2 June to 28 December. The Austrians kept demanding the return of Krakow, and he felt that his presence there was the best assurance that the city would remain in Polish hands. Napoleon's Russian campaign. In April 1811 Poniatowski went to Paris, where he represented the King of Saxony and Duke of Warsaw Frederick Augustus I at the baptism ceremonies of Napoleon's son. He stayed there for 4 months and worked with the Emperor and his generals on plans for the campaign against Russia. He tried to convince the French leaders that the southern route, through the current-day Ukraine, would provide the most benefits. Not only was the region warm if Polish gentry from the Russian partition would join in, and possible Turkish action against Russia could be supported, which was the most advantageous theatre for the upcoming war. Napoleon rejected the idea, as well as the backup scenario, according to which Poniatowski would follow such a route alone with the Polish corps, hoping to take over these formerly Polish areas with the expected help from a Polish uprising planned there. For the Russian campaign of 1812, Poniatowski became commander of 5th Corps of the Grande Armée Écoutée, at nearly 100,000-strong Polish forces in the Grande Armée Écoutée were the greatest Polish military effort before the 20th century. The initial period of the offensive, when Poniatowski was placed under the direction of Jérôme Bonaparte, was wasted. But after Napoleon's brother left, Poniatowski was briefly put in charge of Grande Armée Écoutée's right wing. Fighting on the avant-garde on the advance to Moscow, he distinguished himself at a number of battles. On the 17th of August at Smolensk he personally led his corps assault on the city. On the 7th of September at Borodino the 5th Corps was involved in the day-long fight over the Utitsa Mound, which was finally taken toward the evening, stormed by the entire corps led by Prince Joseph again. On the 14th of September the Polish soldiers were the first ones to enter the Russian capital. By that time, however, Poniatowski, unlike Napoleon, was convinced that the campaign was doomed. The Polish corps fought in the battles at Chirikovo on the 29th of September and Vinkovo on the 18th of October, where Poniatowski saved Murat from a complete defeat by Kutuzov's forces. Regarding the retreat of the Grande Armée Écoutée, Poniatowski was badly injured during the Vyazma battle on the 29th of October. He continued in active service for a few days, but on the 3rd of November his condition forced him to give up his command. He then continued the westbound trip in a carriage with 2 wounded aides. At the Berezina crossing they barely avoided being captured by the Russians, but finally, on the 12th of December, arrived in Warsaw.